Welcome. Hello, everybody. Uh,
Hello.
we are so
Hi.
excited to welcome today Katie, a dear friend of mine.
Hi.
Katie, Katie is a 5D astrologer, teacher, and the founder of Temple of Cosmic Astrology School. And I personally met Katie when I moved to Lisbon and entered my new flat, and there she was, my new roomie, having also only just moved to Lisbon. And ever since then, we've been really developing a very beautiful friendship that I'm very grateful for. And Katie is someone who, once you've met her, you will for sure remember, not only due to her amazingly blue hair, but also because of her unique perspective on life, really. And one of the most impressive skills of her is that she can literally see birth charts in her mind, in her inner eye. So once she has somewhat of an idea when you are born, and also has seen once your chart, she always somehow remembers you for your stars and for your planets. And it's just really beautiful. Yeah, she's crazy knowledgeable about the cosmos, and you can feel her passion, especially for teaching this wisdom to others. She's definitely a born teacher and someone that I hold a loving spot in my heart for, as she has taught me a lot as well, and not only about the cosmos, but just like in general has been a beautiful learning facilitator for me. So now here she is. Welcome, Katie, to this beautiful podcast interview today.
Thank you so much for having me. And thank you for that beautiful introduction. That was really lovely to hear, and I really appreciate that. And I forgot that, of course, we've had so many conversations about you knowing how charts just get tattooed in my brain.
Yeah.
So yes, I probably won't even need to look at the charts for today. I'll just start like kind of looking up here, which is like the chart in my mind. So thank you.
Yeah, I'm really excited for this. And as you can see, also a little bit like high energy and nervous about this. But
Yeah,
I'm
God,
really glad.
I'm just a nervous person. So it's all
I'm really glad to have you here today. So why don't we start with you giving us a little bit of an introduction? So what does it actually mean to be a 5D astrologer? And how come that you created such a beautiful like bond that you have to the cosmos? Like what brought you to that? What's the inspiration for that?
Yeah, sure. So, just trying to think what part of that question I'll begin with. So 5D astrology, I will start with that. The first thing I would say is I'm not really one for labels, to be honest. However, I do feel like the channel of astrology that I work through takes a lot from traditional astrology, but I like to weave it and form a bridge into the new paradigm. So for simplicity, I went with 5D astrology. And what I really just mean by that is we're taking astrology into the new earth, into the new paradigm. And I really believe that it's the collective transpersonal astrology, i.e., what the outer planets are doing. So the outer planets are Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, Chiron, Saturn, these big players, these long-term transiting planets are like the cosmic grinding gears of what is shifting us into this new age, the age of Aquarius, per se. And for me, you know, astrology, it's just always been there. I think I found my first astrology book when I was 9. It was some love, sex, dating book on my mum's bookshelf, and I probably shouldn't have been reading it, but I did. And I fell in love with it. I was like, oh my God, I'm an Aquarius. What does that mean? And it's just sent me on really pretty much a 20-year journey of learning and embodying and just taking this knowledge and sharing it with people. It's what I'm most passionate about. So yeah, I'm super excited to go deep into this with you all today.
And when did the mind thing, like when did you start to notice you could see it in like out there?
Yeah. I think I've actually always been a really like my inner landscape has always been incredibly colorful. It's like I think I said earlier about like the kaleidoscope, and the cosmic kaleidoscope of energies with the meditations that I do. And I feel like, the things that go on here are fun and interesting, can be overwhelming at times, in terms of connection with spirit and, you know, worlds between worlds. And I think that just having that really visual inner landscape just helped me. Maybe it's just like a photographic memory, I don't know. But I just feel such a deep connection to the charts when I look at them that, they just get filed away in this little kind of compartment in my brain. And they never seem to go away. Like, I remember I used to freak out my friends because, like, I would always remember their parents' birthdays and their brothers and sisters, and like once a date is in my mind, it's kind of there forever. It could also be an on the spectrum tendency. You never know, but it's definitely something that is a gift with my work. Absolutely.
Could you, because there might, like, some people that are listening here today, they might actually know already a little bit about astrology, or they have been in touch. Like, some of us might have already birth charts, but other might actually be completely newbies. Could you just explain a little bit, like, what's the concept behind astrology and, like, reading the cosmos in that way? It's like, just to explain for people what it is actually.
Yeah, of course. So I think that's such a good question, because most people's introduction to astrology is like reading a paragraph about a sign in like the back of a newspaper on a Sunday. And that is very basic astrology. It's not even really astrology, and so when we take things deeper than our sun sign, we start to explore the ascendant and our moon sign, and we actually have each planet and many asteroids, even planetary bodies within our chart. So a real astrology chart can actually show you all these different facets of your personality, your soul's evolution, past lives, your love language, your role within your generational path in this lifetime. So all of this is created from the ascendant. So if there was anything for a newbie to take away from this, it would be by learning your ascendant. That actually gives you the beginning point of your map, your blueprint. And from that point, all of the planets kind of flow out in your own personal pattern, your own soul vibration. And then that's when people like me, or you, if you choose to learn astrology, can start to read this language, because astrology really is, it's a language. It's just working with archetypes and planets, and a bit of cosmic magic as well. But yeah, I would say definitely the ascendant is the number one thing to learn to help you find your flow within this kind of cosmic realm.
Yeah, it's funny, right? Because, like, normally we all now know what our sun sign is, but the ascendant, like, I only ever heard of it like maybe right before I met you, a little bit before that. But before that, I never heard of the ascendant, and I was like, whoa, what's that? And then when you came into my life, like, there were just like all the other things, and I was like, oh, 12 houses, and I was like, oh gosh, like, mind blown. Yeah. And it's true. Yeah. I mean, the birth chart, if you know how to read it, it can go as detailed. Like, for me, I was shocked, but like, I have a little bit of a tendency to show compulsive behavior, and it's in my chart. And it's just like,
definitely with your Gemini ascendant, that compulsion, that mental compulsion is definitely there.
Yeah, no, it's so interesting and it's kind of like a never ending opportunity to learn, really, because you can really go deep into any sort of aspect of your life and gain knowledge about yourself through that.
Absolutely. And that's, I think, what's so empowering about it. It's not, it just offers such a level of depth into your path, and not to the point that we then hang on to it and that suddenly that rules our life. That's something important to say too, because sometimes people get so invested into astrology, and because it's so immersive, that then we can kind of forget you know, the real world or reality, or I even keep myself in check, you know, because charts are in my mind so constantly and I'm always relating things back to astrology. I'm like, Katie, you're talking to a person, not a chart. So just, you know, remember to keep that heart connection there and not just be so in the mind, because astrology is actually very logical and very mathematical. And, you know, it's very much a mind-based art. And that's what I really enjoy about it. You know, over the years, I've learned all different types of healing modalities. You know, I also read tarot. I consider myself intuitive, you know, in that capacity. But working individually with people, for me and my own personal makeup, I found that really draining on me energetically, where astrology kind of gives me that buffer, in terms of the energetics between myself and, you know, the individual or the students that I'm working with. Plus, it just never seems to tire me. I could just talk and talk and talk endlessly about it, much to the, you know, annoyance sometimes of the people in my life.
Nice. I love it. I love you, Katie. I've had a reading with Katie and it was wonderful. It was so good. Can you guys hear me? My internet is a little choppy. Okay. Yeah, so, you know, you mentioned this thing that, you know, we can, you know, you mentioned, Marlena, that, oh my God, I can see like my characteristics are really there. They're mapped out. So it's almost like your blueprint, right?
Yeah.
How can people use that blueprint for self-development, for one, and then I'll ask you the next question, because
Okay, so it's a two-part question.
I have so many questions. Yeah,
that's okay. So astrology for self-development, you know, I think that we grow up in a, you know, we are conditioned in a world that doesn't really allow space for a lot of self-development, because, you know, and things are shifting very quickly, as we can see. You know, where we're at this point in time compared to when we were born, for example, is very different. But for the most part, you know, we are kind of raised to just get a job and work for the man and have a house and do all these very like things that bring a lot of joy, but also it can be very kind of limiting and mundane. And I think people are really seeking for more. And astrology is such a powerful tool for understanding your psyche. You know, I've spent a lot of time, you know, some of my favorite astrologers actually work in the realm of psychological astrology, like Liz Green, for example, is brilliant. You know, she was one of the forerunners. You know, there's also Jan Spiller. So some of these teachers have been, you know, incredible for me in understanding the deeper psychological patterns within astrology. And for example, like the house in astrology that rules the psyche is the 8th house. So 8th house individuals naturally have like a proclivity to exploring their psyche. Now, whether this is like an easy process or not really depends on the individual, but that's like one path that we can actually explore. Like our own psychology. You know, even Jung, for example, was working with astrology. So yeah, it's really amazing when we start to sort of put all of these pieces together.
Oh, wow. I've got Chiron in the 8th house, Katie.
Okay. Yes. So,
no, we won't go into that.
Yeah,
but I know what you mean. And so my question with that as well is like, I've always wondered about my blueprints, say, and my chart's strong, you know, it's like very intense in one place. And you know, been doing lots of self-development work through understanding my energetic makeup, my psyche, through astrology and other things. But I find that even still, as I grow and expand and mature within myself, still those energetic configurations are almost like I'm bound to them in some way or another. So my question is, what's the line between like free will and then things just being mapped out already? Does that make sense?
It does. It's great question, Roma. Love it. So I'm going to answer that from like an astrological perspective, because this is something that comes up regularly too. People are like, well, you know, are we just conditioned to be, you know, if we have Venus in the 3rd house, are we always going to, or if we have Venus in, I don't know, like Gemini, does that mean that I'm bound to that, like Roma said? And yes and no. It's like, that is the pathway that your soul has chosen to, like, for example, let's stick with Venus here. So Venus is our love language. So that placement could be how you are exploring love and connection in this lifetime. But what I love to use, and this is going to be a bit more advanced astrology, but I really believe that progressed charts and looking at our progressions is how we actually see the true evolution of our blueprint. So a progression is where we actually, I won't get into the complicated mathematics of it, but if you progress a chart, it moves forward, usually the sun and the ascendant 1 degree forwards every year. So for example, when I was born, I'm a 13 degree Aquarius, and now at age 32, the mathematics on that, I think my sun is roughly at around 16 degrees Pisces progressed. Now, this never replaces my Aquarius nature. That is what I am here to embody in this lifetime. But if I look at who I am on a day-to-day level in alignment with the current transits, the progression shows how we are growing through the placements that we were born with. Now, the outer planets, for example, Chiron or Uranus, these barely move our entire life because they are so slow moving. For example, Pluto takes 230 years to do 1 rotation through a chart. So he's going to stay on that same degree that you were born with really your entire life. But the sun, as I said, it will move from, you know, let's say you live until you're 90, God bless you, you will have most likely 3 to 4 different archetypal sun experiences. So if we start at Aquarius, we move into Pisces, we move into Aries, and if I get lucky, I may also have a Taurian progressed experience in this lifetime. And these take about 30 years. So if we look at the, so if we look at these kind of 30-year periods, we can add that as kind of another layer. Or it's like, imagine if we're cooking, you know, it's just an extra ingredient or something that's simmering away beneath the surface of that blueprint that we have come into this lifetime with. Does that make sense?
Yeah, you're kind of adding, like you said, different flavors to what you already have, your base, your foundation.
Yep, exactly. And it's not ever to replace what you were given. You know, this is something that I get asked by students a lot too, because it's like when they start to discover, you know, progressions and all these extra charts we can explore, human beings being as curious as we are, we tend to want to drop what we are actually here to do, I guess. And so, you know, it's not that we get lost in the progress chart and that ever replaces the experiences that we have through our natal. But again, you know, another example of that Venus that I spoke of could be, you know, by transit. So, you know, Venus is actually about to move into Gemini. I think this week, don't quote me, but I know Venus is in the very late degrees of Taurus at the moment. And we're going to have a Venus retrograde this year in Gemini. So a individual who has Venus in Gemini is about to have their Venus return whilst experiencing a Venus retrograde. So see how that individual is going to experience that Venus retrograde differently to me, who has Venus in Pisces. And I would be experiencing that retrograde by a square, because those two signs make this angle to each other in a chart.
Fascinating. I love it. Yeah, I've always, like, I heard once this thing, like, that it's, you know, your chart is almost like the roll of the dice, but it's not set. And that the more conscious you live, the more you can really shift these patterns that are, you know, there as the blueprint.
Absolutely, because these patterns are here, you know, they're not something that are just here to be solved, you know, they're something that are here to be worked through. And we can reach a place of, I guess, resolution or solving something within us. But the beauty of this lifetime, or any lifetime, is that it's the journey and the experience of getting there and of moving through some of these more challenging things we may have in ourselves. You know, maybe an individual has, I don't know, I'm trying to think of something challenging off the top of my head. I don't know, Pluto opposite Mercury, okay? So Pluto is the planet of transformation, you know, of really intensity, and it's opposing Mercury, which is like the mental realms, thinking quickly. So imagine having these two natally in opposition. You would feel like this heaviness around your thoughts, or maybe attracting in very intense communication experiences in your life. Now, the only way that you work through that is by having these intense experiences and growing and transforming through them. And that doesn't mean that these kind of issues may cease in your life, but you learn through your own self-development how to find your own voice and work through these challenging signatures per se in your chart. So, you know, they're never going to go away, but we hope that as individuals, as we grow and mature and reflect and become aware of ourselves, that we find ways to master our own discomforts or our own challenges that we hold within us.
Yeah, and I love that. Even, I mean, I know so little only about astrology, because like for me, numbers and like it's something very mathematical and logical. Doesn't mean that I'm not logically thinking, but like having numbers and like images, it just really like blows my mind, and it's just overwhelming.
Yep.
But even though it's like it's even that the birth chart, so if you have identified, for an instance, what you just sat with, I think it was Pluto and Mercury, right?
Yep.
That they're opposing one another, and so that is a challenge. It even, like the birth chart, even by the positioning of these planets, I believe, no, in which house they are, it gives you kind of like an idea of how you could actually, like with which perspective you could go on this challenge. And actually, so for an instance, it's in, I don't know, like you would probably be better in like creating a
scenario.
Like,
Yep. Okay, so yeah, say for example, we have like Pluto in Scorpio opposite Taurus, Mercury in Taurus. An individual with that placement is going to be very different to, say, someone who has exactly the same opposition, Pluto Mercury, but they have Pluto in Libra, and they would therefore have to have Mercury, if it's in opposition, it would be in Aries. These are the axes that we have. So whilst Pluto and Mercury has its own type of opposing form of communication that it makes, the archetypes of the sign that they're in will shape how that individual expresses or maybe holds within that experience. And then also the houses. So, you know, if they have this falling across, you know, their 6th and 12th house, it's going to be the opposition between being of service and being of selfless service, you know, of that Piscean realm, where maybe someone has it in the 4th house of family and the 10th house of career. So that opposition is going to play out in their life in a much more externalized way than someone that has it on a very internal 12th house perspective. It's all about the layers with astrology. Layers on layers on layers. Yes.
Yeah. It's just like, bah!
Yeah, you just blew my mind. You just explained it so well. So well.
Good, I'm
It's
glad.
hard to explain astrology, you know, there's so many layers, like you say, to it, and it's very, you know, there's angles and then archetypes and many things.
Yeah, and it never ends, you know, it's a continuous rabbit hole of layers, but that's the fun of exploring it, I think. So when you can master those basics, that's when you can kind of go free and just delve into all of these amazing different charts, like I said, the progressions and transits and composite charts and synastry, and it's endless.
I'm kind of like Marlena. I like Roma knows now, like I say it all the time when she talks about, oh, you're this and Venus that, and I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about. And so I have to be honest, like I love everything that you're saying, but I'm going in my mind going, oh my God, there's just so much.
It's a lot.
Question for you is like, do you have students that come to you as well that go, okay, how do I process? Like, what's the first step if I wanted to learn more about astrology? There is just so much, like maybe it's in my astrology or it's like my limiting belief that I just don't, I a house, and then within the house something else, and within there is something outside there, but like how do you start? Where do you start?
Exactly.
As a student.
As a student, so normally how I explain it, and bear with me with this because sometimes I get this confused as well, but so I usually say that imagine the planet, let's just keep sticking with Venus today. Venus is the planet, obviously, is the person. So Venus is in Gemini, okay? And it's in the 4th house. So Venus in Gemini, imagine they put on like this Gemini costume, okay? I don't know, whatever you think of Gemini, like they put in a hat and all these things that make them like seem like a Gemini. And then that planet, that archetype is in the 4th house. So imagine you have a house with 12 rooms, and each room is decorated or correlated to the archetypes or themes of that house. So the 4th house is the Cancer house, the moon, okay? So maybe we walk into a room that's like, you know, really cozy and dimly lit, and there's maybe, you know, a bookshelf and incense burning and tea and all these cozy kind of home things, okay? So this is where this individual's Venus lives. This is where this Venus thrives. This is where this Venusian energy, this love language this person embodies, this is where it dwells within, okay? So someone with that love language in the 4th house is going to want relationships that feel like home, that feel like that. But having it in Gemini, they need stimulation. So maybe even though I've given it this beautiful kind of like, you know, books and incense, and, you know, maybe there's still like a stereo or a TV, or, you know, they need that Gemini stimulation. They need a phone. They need to be texting their friends and communicating. That's how they feel connected to their love language. So that's how I usually explain the characters. You know, like I said, the planet is the person, the sign is the costume, the way you present yourself, and the house is the stage where you play that story out. And then if we have aspects, imagine then that it's just 2 characters. So you've got one character that likes to be at home, but another person's Venus might be in the house of, I don't know, I'm trying to think of something that's completely opposite to that. I don't know, the 11th house, which is really about like groups and communities and being out in public and, you know, teaching and talking and, you know, being a part of a community. That's very different to someone who feels loving and safe and comfortable at home. So imagine then these 2 individuals have to find a middle point and a middle ground between their Venusian energy. And now I'm kind of getting into synastry, and it's like a whole other wormhole that I'm taking you down. But does that make sense in terms of like how to play those
Yeah,
layers?
I love that. Yeah, I really like that. Thank you.
Man, what I also so love about astrology is that every time you just hear about, like, I think a lot of people actually have this, that they don't have an immediate access to it, but it's just like really like, whoa, what's this? But like every time you hear about it, just like another piece kind of settles in, and you have this like, oh yeah, right. It feels a little bit more like I know a little bit more, and I know a little bit more. And I really like the explanation of like the rooms and like the decoration of it. It just gives it so much more of an understanding, really. So
yeah, I think it's just that visualness, and teaching through giving my students that visual. It's so helpful, you know, like, and I take students through, like, you know, I get them to write in a journal, like, go on a walk through your own personal house, like, i.e. the entire chart and the 12 rooms, and, you know, write down what your room looks like. You know, my first house in Pisces, Marlena, is going to look different to your first house in Gemini, okay? So I get my students to intimately connect with their chart by doing this house tour, per se, and writing how they would decorate it and how they connect with it and how they envision it. as a way of connecting to those archetypal energies that they carry.
Wow.
It's
Beautiful.
fun.
And would you say for those that are kind of like new-ish, I guess we're talking a lot about the patterns and
Yeah.
but also people can find their soul purpose, right? You can
Yes.
look into that. So for anyone that is interested in this current transition phase that we're in, that it could help a lot.
Definitely. Yep, I think that astrology is a really great tool. Like I said at the beginning, how I prefer to work with collective astrology. You know, as much as I enjoy working one-on-one with individuals, I love teaching about like what the hell is going on now, and how can we work with this and make sense of it.
Please share.
Yeah. So, you know, I mean, where do we begin with where things are at now? The main thing, you know, I did take some notes on this because there's so much, but I wanted, you know, I don't want to go too deep and overwhelm people, but the main thing that's really standing out to me at the moment is actually the transit that we are having of Uranus in Taurus. So Uranus is the ruling planet of Aquarius. It's a modern ruler. So the ancient ruler of Aquarius was Saturn. And when Uranus was discovered, it then transitioned over to Uranus. But I do believe Aquarius, like it's still important to really look at the traditional rulers always. So Aquarius is a dual ruled sign. So if we have this planet, like if we think of Aquarius, right, we think of usually like eccentric and, you know, humanitarian and progressive and rebellious and forward thinking. You know, it's a very futuristic type sign. These individuals are always a few steps ahead of everybody else. So then they're perceived as being weird, but they're already just living in some other dimension we just haven't really tapped into yet. So if we think of the planet that rules that energy then in the sign of Taurus, now Uranus takes 7 years to transit each sign. So we can see how this 7-year period, if we track back over like the last 80 years, when the last time Uranus was in Taurus, this is how astrologically we start to see patterns. And this is what I love. Like I like to look at, well, when was the last time we had this kind of energy, and see what was going on in the world at that time and how we can actually not repeat history, because we live in a realm and a time and a space that we're always going to be cycling through patterns. That's just humanity. If we look back at everything, we're always just building upon, again, it's these layers on what our predecessors have created or channeled or brought through or destroyed. So we need to, by tracking these patterns, we can really start to understand how we cannot go where it went last time, but how we can build from that and take it somewhere else. So Taurus is the sign of money, finances, physicality. You know, Taurus is all about what can I own? What do I value? What's mine? You know, all of the signs are associated with ages as well, of like human development. So Taurus is considered like that toddler kind of age, okay? They're still very much about like finding emotional comfort from things that they can externally like pick up and learn about and say that it's mine, I have this, it's mine to play with. You know, that's kind of the archetypal energy of Taurus. So if we have Uranus in Taurus, this shows a progressive, sudden change in the economy. Astrologers have been talking about this time for quite some time. And I definitely think that there's, you know, relevance in predictive astrology, but, you know, I don't think any of us can really predict how this would come about. Like, who really thought that the potential fall of the economy would come from a virus, for example? Okay. Like, I mean, maybe there is some brilliant astrologer out there that got it down to the T that much. I haven't met them yet, but if you know one, like put them in touch with me, please. But so we can see now that what we're experiencing is this is what, you know, the virus is assisting in the breakdown of these structures that we have known for a long time need to shift. And we know that, unfortunately, often in humanity's history and experience, that the biggest progressions and shifts that we have in life come from incredibly challenging times. And I also find it fascinating how Saturn has just moved into Aquarius, which is the first time it's been there since 1991. And again, this Aquarius energy, this Uranian energy is being activated again as we are building towards the shift to the age of Aquarius. So this is just the seeding and the beginning of a new paradigm that is being co-created by those who are consciously aware enough of their own self-development to really be in alignment with their purpose, their mission. I mean, I hate using those kind of words, but to bring it down to an individual level, that is how astrology can help you find your place in that collective chaos that is being experienced at this time. Is that making sense so far? I'm just going to check in before I keep like going on and on as I tend to do. But yeah, did that answer your question, Amanda?
Yes.
Great.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'd love to ask with that, how can someone on a kind of practical level begin to understand their chart, and then in relation to what's going on, like is there like a particular part of the chart that might be good to look at, or maybe it's just or maybe it's just focusing on the transits that are going on at the moment, and then how you can adapt to that, or a relationship of both.
I think both. You know, it's always good to learn your own, like we said at the beginning, your own blueprint. Just understand your own basic nature, your own Uranian nature. Like we'll keep talking about Uranus here. So understanding your own Uranus, because you're born into a generation, you know, of a 7-year period where you are, you know, imprinted with, let's say you were born in Uranus and Sagittarius generation. You and these people who share this with you are here to break down structures and paradigms in a very Sagittarius way. This is a very knowledge-based generation. They love, you know, to travel, to explore, to, you know, they're quite restless by nature. So that's how I would say to an individual, like, you know, understand your own rebelliousness firstly, and then have a look at the transit to see where it's being played out currently. So for example, you know, Uranus is transiting my 3rd house. So for me, what is being broken down and being restructured in this very Uranian type way is communication, learning something new. You know, I'm getting all of these sort of inspirations to want to like explore and learn more. You know, on a really mundane level, you know, you could say like, this is the perfect time to start like a podcast or a YouTube channel or share your information. You know, that would be like a Uranus 3rd house and perfect timing kind of space. You know, someone that has it in the 5th house would be having a lot of these shifts and changes in, I don't know, creativity, and they would be channeling through, you know, they would have this need to really be exploring like more creative, fun-loving kind of aspects of themselves. You know, the 9th house would be around, that's still learning. Yeah, so like still learning something new. The 12th house is something spiritual. Each place has like a way to help you unlock your part in the greater whole.
Okay, I have lots of questions right now. Well, first of all, just to give a little bit of an understanding for people, how do they actually know how, like, where do they need to look on their chart? Like, do I, for instance, need to look where the planets are positioned right now, or do I need to look on a specific degree of something?
You would just look at where it aligns in your chart. Like, I'm happy. Do you want me to share my screen for a second? And I can show you guys just the chart.
Because then people can also understand what a birth chart looks like, or a chart looks like. Yeah,
exactly. So here we go. This is a chart for right now.
Yeah.
So excuse me. So we're talking about Uranus. So Uranus is here, 5 degrees of Taurus, Now, if this was a baby born at this very moment, they were born at 4:53 p.m. in Lisbon, they would have their natal Uranus in their 9th house, we can see here. Now, to understand how this flows, let's create a, I don't know, let's just use mine. So if we put my chart in the center, then I can layer the transits around the outside. So we can see, where am I looking? So as I said, Uranus here in the 3rd house, it's transiting that space for me. You know, at the moment, all of this Capricorn energy and Aquarius energy is up here in my 11th and 12th house. Is that making sense?
It does.
Yes.
Yeah.
What kind of program is this?
This is called, I use the Mac version. This is Solar Gold, but the original program is Solar Fire. It's amazing.
Wow.
It's a good investment if you are curious. There's lots of like free websites you can use, but this is like what I prefer to use, just because it's nice and colorful and easy to see things as well.
So I have then a question regarding if I understood this correctly. So what you just did for the current situation is that you were looking for patterns in, like, when was the moment in the past that something similar had happened, right?
Yep.
So right now for me the question is, okay, so if you're in the repeat of a pattern, how can we collectively shift up? So is there anything that you can like say in terms of recommendation? What is it that we are asked now to focus on so that we can level up on a collective perspective, but also individually?
Yes. So it's important to look back at the last time we had these transits as a way, like I said, to see like what was progressing at that time, but maybe what also came in that was maybe not of the highest space. But that particular alignment, for example, in the 1930s, had very different astrology going on to everything else happening now. So even though those two individual Uranus transits are the same, it's Taurus, the way that Uranus was communicating with everything else is different then. So we wouldn't look at everything at complete face value from that time. You know, one thing that's different, for example, is Pluto at that time in the 1930s was in Cancer, which is the opposing sign of where Pluto now is in Capricorn. So we've actually completely flipped the Plutonian evolutionary phase of humanity, because that is what Pluto is. Pluto is our soul's evolution. So before, in the 1930s and pre-World War II, you know, Pluto in Cancer is the sign of home and family and patriotism. We can see there that how things exploded on a global scale because of people's, you know, just the different mindset at that time, you know, just where the world was around families, and even, I guess, exploring different worlds and connecting. And now we're in Capricorn, which is bringing down those structures that really over the last 100 years-ish have been built up. So Capricorn is all about structure, boundaries. You know, it's very patriarchal in energy, right? You know, Capricorn in the 10th house is that father energy. The Cancer in the moon is that mothering, matriarchal energy. So this is how we've kind of flipped, but both of these periods have had this common denominator of Uranus in Taurus. And we can see in the 1930s just how quickly the world progressed industrially. And I mean, that was still post the Industrial Revolution. But, you know, pre-war, we really started to like up the game. Like, think of how quickly the world developed in terms of just like weaponry and machinery and all of this stuff that kind of came in between the First World War and the Second World War. That's one example of how we were progressing, you know, for good or for ill, around Taurian type themes of the very physical world, protecting what's mine. You know, that's very Pluto in Cancer as well. It's like there was this real energy at the time of protecting what's mine, and also this this separatism, I think, that is unfortunately being repeated a lot this time as well. So, you know, we have to learn from our mistakes and at that time, and not get swept up in the chaos and the noise and the fascism. And like, honestly, you can make a whole other like webinar with me on that stuff, and I don't even know if I'm going to really go deep into that this time, to be honest. But you know, we are living in incredibly powerful times, and the way to master this is to master the transit within your own self first. When you understand how it's affecting you as an individual, you are then in a firmer foundation within yourself, and you are then able to guide and assist others who are also experiencing this, because we're all in this together. That's what Saturn in Aquarius really is to me. The church bells are going off, perfectly timed. Is that humanity is in this together. You know, this virus knows no race, no creed, no color. You know, everyone is susceptible, and it's bringing people, even though we're having this social distancing, how Saturn in Aquarius, it's actually bringing people closer together. It's just doing it in a very uncomfortable way, because again, how do human beings learn? Usually through discomfort and challenge and things that we don't want to do, right? We kind of have to be dragged through things. How long have we been getting the message of things need to change? And we don't, because we're comfortable. Human beings are creatures of comfort. Even people who are awake and aware, you know, we still have our own vices and things that we work through individually. And that's not to blame the individual. It's just that we all have our own shit going on, you know, and sometimes it's just easier to just be like, oh, like, yeah, someone else will change the world. I don't have to think about it. You know, I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing, and that's fine. But now we have been pushed into this global time of like, we have to think differently, and that's Uranus. It's very sudden. It's just change, and that triggers a lot of people. So you have to find your own center within this change. And I think that being at home, like, is such a easy place to do that. I mean, our generation is being asked to fight this war from the comfort of our sofas and our beds, compared to our grandparents or our great-grandparents who were out on the front lines during this similar kind of cosmic energy. So, you know, we're in very different times, but it's still the same themes that are directing this kind of show. Making sense?
Yeah. And Katie, yeah, do you know why there is this energy of, the way I see it is that our freedom, our physical freedom is being restricted, limited. And on the flip side, it's also asking us to go quite, you know, literally inward, and therefore, you know, to go inward energetically, spiritually. Where does that come from in terms of, you know, what's happening with the planets, do you feel?
Yeah, sure. You know, I think I mean, there's lots of things. One thing I would say is, you know, we're in the final degrees of the North Node moving through Cancer, which is this, again, sign of like, you know, home and our own, you know, our own inner space. So this last few weeks that we have of the North Node in Cancer before it moves into Gemini is really pushing us into our home space, because the South Node has been moving through Capricorn. So the South Node in astrology is like karma and the past, and it's moving through the sign of, you know, the outside world. You know, Capricorn rules the external world, and things have been cleared in that space, and we've been collectively guided home within. And that's what this last 18-month cycle has been. You know, the more that we could kind of find that sort of space of compassion within, and, you know, connect more to our family or our soul family, our friends. You know, it doesn't always have to be physical family, but there has been this real kind of inner world and outer world polarity at play since November 2018 is when that kind of began. So I think it's really interesting that it's been pushed to such an intensity in the final 2 degrees of this transit. Now the nodes will move into Gemini and Sagittarius. Don't quote me, but around the 6th of May, I think. And that's when we're going to be shifting into this completely new vibration of where we need to head into, which is going to be knowledge and information and learning, but being discerning about the information that we come into contact with, because as we can already see, there is a plethora of like shit out there that we have to sift through daily to make sense of. And that comes from the 2019 signature that we had of Jupiter squared Neptune. These 2 planets squared 3 times last year. And this square is like, Neptune is illusions. Neptune is, you know, I always see it as like Alice in Wonderland. Again, it's that kaleidoscope type energy. And then Jupiter is like the biggest planet. It expands what it touches. So if these 2 are squaring, they're making an uncomfortable aspect. You know, they're hitting this point together. They're causing friction between each other, and this is what caused this whole you know, we've been building to it for a long time, but we can see now that we very much live in a world where what you see is not what you see, and that can be explained into many different ways. It's not like about conspiracy theories or anything like that. It's just that you personally have to take responsibility for the information that you read, listen to, hear, whatever, you know, like you can't just take things at face value. You can if you want, but you're going to get left behind. And that's Uranus and the progression that Uranus is bringing into Taurus. It is seeding the new earth, because Taurus is the first earth sign. So we're really in this 7-year period until 2026 of all of these pieces falling into place. And how do things fall into place? By falling apart first. So it's kind of like this collective tower moment. Like I think about the tarot, you know, and that's what this Uranus and Taurus transit is bringing about.
Amazing. Pulled a card that said exactly the same thing today.
Really?
Yeah, it's
amazing.
So cool. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Really as scary as it is exciting. It's like, it's so crazy. Like I think a lot of people are actually quite excited to be right now here, to be able to witness this, what's happening, because it's really like you're witnessing how things are literally falling apart, and either you are kind of like going with the flow and showing that flexibility and openness, or you're really like more tending towards like watching news and getting stuck in the fear and all of these things, that and the bad and the worry and all of these things. And I find it quite curious because like a lot of friends of mine, they're actually right now put in the position of actually physically being in their hometown and being in the home of their families. And it's so interesting that this happens right now for so many people, because that actually pulls us into this position of, okay, we really have to go inwards. It's like there's no way around.
Yeah, there's no way around this right now. And, you know, I think it's actually, you know, look, it's hard. You know, for me, you know, it's easy. I'm an introvert. My life hasn't really changed, to be completely honest. But I totally get that for people who live a very kind of 9-to-5 life or aren't very self-aware, this is huge. This is like, holy fuck, what do I do with this time in this space? You know, it's overwhelming for them. But I think that, you know, it's really, I actually see it as being like a spiritual fast track. And, you know, I look at my own kind of experiences that I've had in terms of like awakening and ascension and all these, you know, whatever. But within that space over the past few years, you know, this is kind of how I've lived my life. Like I've needed these periods where like, you know, I've barely been able to leave the home. I've been really deep in this voidal space of my own journey. And that has prepared me for all kinds of other things that I've then stepped back out into the world and explored. And I feel like that this is what's happening now for for everybody, and that it is a fast track, and that if people are able to, you know, turn down that external noise and that chaos and just go within, no matter how hard it is or how triggering, you know, and using the right tools. I think that's important as well. You know, it's like, and the right tools come from, you know, discerning the information that you come into contact with and finding what resonates for you. You know, there's so much information out there, even within the new age or spiritual or wellness worlds, that can be incredibly well-meaning, but don't quite hit the mark, you know. And that could even be said for what I share today. There could be someone listening to this that just doesn't vibe with it, and that's totally fine. You know, like, none of us should be here to sell someone else our belief or what we think the world should be. We are here to actually do that inner internal work, find our truth, and then know that the right people will connect with it. We don't have to convince anyone of anything, but we can see that everyone's trying to convince, like, you know, your house should be clean and you've got all this time to like clean your closets and write your magnum opus and all of this stuff. And yeah, great. But also, like, we're going through a pandemic. People are suffering. People are overwhelmed. People don't know what to do with themselves. And if you just stare at your phone for 10 hours a day and that's all you can muster, that's okay. We know long term that's not how we want to sustain ourselves spiritually, emotionally, physically. But if that's what you need to do on a daily basis to move through this period, do it without guilt or shame, because that is what is going to create a virus around you. And I'm not speaking physically here, I'm speaking energetically. That fear and that shame that we project onto ourselves, that is what makes us suffer, you know, not actually doing the work that we are so afraid to reflect on and actually explore and delve into.
I have to breathe that in a little bit.
You do you, babe.
Somehow a question that came up, and maybe here it's not the right place to ask it, so feel free to say if it's not, but a question that came up, I have the feeling that a lot of us there are actually put in a position where we really have the feeling, yes, we can see the flow, you know, we can see, like what you're saying, what you said, it's like we go on this wave that is currently there. But a lot of people around us that are very dear to our hearts are not capable just yet. And I really appreciated what you just said. It's like, it's okay to also just spend that, but like, how can we support people that are struggling with this and that are jumping into this shame or guilt or stuff like that? That's just like a question that came up, but I don't know if it's actually something that you feel good to.
No, sure. I mean, it's, you know, it's something I'm happy to answer. It's not something that like I'm the definitive know-it-all of the perfect response to that. But, you know, I think that it's just about vulnerability and holding space and, you know, letting the people that we love know that we are here, and that when they are ready to reach out and when they are ready to question or explore or put the phone down or whatever it is, that there are safe spaces for them to connect to. Because I think that in all of this chaos, and I'm not immune to it either, you know, I can definitely say that the first couple of days when all of this kicked off, for sure in the back of my mind I was like, I'm going to write my book and I'm going to do this. And then about 3 days later I was like, no, like the Tiger King just got released on Netflix, are you kidding? Like that's me for the next few days, you know. And that's okay. I think that sometimes in the new age community, like I said, people mean well, and this isn't a criticism at all of another individual, but it's like in our quest sometimes as healers or givers, we can see the way. We can see if this person just did this one little thing, their life would change, right? But if they're not ready to take on that message, we cause so much more pain and turmoil, and we actually distract that person from their own path of their own evolution, really, if we get involved. And this is what as healers we learn, and this comes into even codependency that so many of us have worked through, because we never want to try to control another, but in our quest for service, we still get enmeshed in these type of patterns. I think that's just something to be really conscious of at this time. So it's like, even with my own work, you know, I'm like, how do I connect with people right now without selling them something? Okay, because I don't feel comfortable doing that. I don't want to come across as like, I have all the answers, pay me all this money and I'll tell you how to fix your life. Like, not that I would ever say it like that, but you know, there's this own voice in my head that kind of directs this. And I'm sure each of you doing similar kind of work, it's come up for you as well. Like, how do we tell people that we're here for them without selling it to them as like a, you know, a COVID-19 spiritual product? You know, that personally doesn't resonate with me. And I think that the way that we do this is through conscious communication and vulnerability and connection. And, you know, even just from this conversation that we're having today is a perfect example of that, you know, of just finding an hour that we can spend together and share this conversation could open doorways for many people or one person. And if that one person gets the message, then we've served that purpose, and how beautiful. So hopefully that answered the path of that question.
Yes, it did. Thank you so much. That was really beautiful.
Thank you.
Wow, that was so well encapsulated and wrapped up. You've got the bow on top.
I've got the bow. I've got it all prepared.
You're a pro, Katie. Love it.
Thank you.
So much love to you.
Thank you.
I've learned so much today. Wow, thank you. Not
No,
even
you're
today,
absolutely,
in the space of an
you're
hour.
absolutely welcome. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. Actually, there's one thing I wanted to say. I don't know if we're wrapping up or not, but I could tell, but there's one thing I wrote. I just wanted to come back to it because I was researching and being a nerd about it before we connected. But I work a lot with degree astrology, and this is where each degree has like a channeled message of what like the vibration of that energy form is. And I was reading about the degree where Saturn currently is on Aquarius, and I just think that it's really so perfectly summarizes where we're at collectively. If I can share that with you all, bear with me. I have doctor's handwriting, so let's see if I can read what I wrote. But so we're looking at 0 degrees Aquarius, and it says, taking a good look at things with an eager eye brings you right into the dilemma of polarities. As you stand there faced with different sides, you are impartial. Neither side pulls you more sharply than the other. Immense opportunity, huge challenge. You have vital potential for brilliant synthesis, but a subtle temptation to think too long. A schooling in alchemy in every moment. Do you find what is ready to emerge, or do you think about it? Progressive evolution draws you through all your mistakes into all that can be. And I just feel like it's such a beautiful way of putting that kind of, again, it's like, it becomes so visual in putting out like that polarity that we're kind of all in at the moment, which is like, where was it? About being impartial. That's what really stuck out to me. You know, we all just need to be impartial right now because there's so many truths and so many fallacies right now. And that I don't really believe that any one individual at this point in time has all the answers, because we're all here to figure this out together. So yes, we can share and connect in that way, which is very Aquarius. But as soon as any one person decides that they have that God complex of like, which is the shadow Aquarius nature of I have all the answers, we've lost our way. So I think if there's anything I leave you with, it's like, come back to that space of that, you know, I was going to make up a word, but anyway, of being impartial. That would be the key that I would leave this with.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Perfect ending.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's this,
Huh?
can I just quickly, what came from that as well, Katie, is that this like almost reset button that is being placed on us, this 0 point, and that is the place of being impartial, being neutral. It's like there's either side, but we've somehow can come to center in this.
Absolutely.
Come from a place.
Yeah, and these times have been called the Great Reset. You know, one last thing I'm going to add, and then I promise I will let you go, is that, you know, we hear a lot about the age of Pisces and the age of Aquarius and all of this stuff. Like, what does it mean? And I think people have this like perception that one day we all just wake up and it's like the age of Aquarius, right? But it usually takes, if we track back all of the ages, the age of Aries, the age of Taurus, we go like right back to like pre-Babylonian times. The time periods where we shift between these cosmic ages, the 26,000 year cycles that we move through, it actually takes about 100 years before the new cycle is really truly set into motion. So it's almost like we live in this space of no time. And this is what we are living now. This is, and it's like what Roma said, like the reset, absolutely, that 0 point, because Pluto moves into Aquarius in 2024. Now that is when we are much more steeped into these Aquarian energies, but I really believe that it will take about 100 years from this kind of 2012-ish date to really anchor and embody what we here now as awakened sovereign beings are working towards for future generations. And most likely we're not going to see all of the changes that we are implementing in this lifetime, because we are forerunners for this new earth paradigm that we are seeding and creating. And like I said earlier, in order to seed and create that, we have to collapse anything that is of a time and space that no longer resonates. And so it is 100-year period. I just wanted to interject that, because I think people tend to throw around like the age of Aquarius as if it's already happening, and it confuses people because we can't jump ahead timelines when we're not ready. And as you can see with where the world is at today, with what we are experiencing, we are not ready, and that's okay. It's so okay to not be okay. And I think that's what we need to tell people who are struggling, like, feel the fear, like, and embrace it. You know, yes, we know fear is a virus and fear doesn't do us any good, but that doesn't mean it goes away. You have to sit in that uncomfortability to heal that. And I feel collectively we are in this 100-year space of like no time, of that breathing space before the new can come in. But yeah, so hopefully, Roma, that answers your question. I feel like I go off on these tangents, but anyway, we came back eventually.
No, so spot on, really. And I feel, I don't know about Marlena and Amanda, but you've left me feeling really secure in where I'm at, wherever that is, and wherever the people around me are at, and that it's okay.
Yeah, because what we have now is enough, and it may not be everything we thought we wanted at this point, but now that we are in the safety of our homes and just ourselves, we realize that we can actually provide for ourselves. And maybe we're going to have less for a while, and that's okay, but it's creating that space for us to up level and move to that next space collectively and consciously where we need to move towards.
And it brings somehow so much like peace and patience within. Like sometimes you get with everything that's happening, because energies are quite like for some people now, you know, and you get like, oh, but we need to see this and this is going to happen, that we sometimes forget about what you just said. It takes time. We are not, might not see the total shift, and it's okay. It's fine. And we don't have to have the changes happening right now, right here, all of them.
Yeah. Exactly. And you'll be surprised at how many changes have already come in that we actually haven't integrated and aren't able to see yet. Like, we are living the change. We just have to take it step by step and moment by moment. And, you know, that's the beauty of reflection and the inner work, is that you're then able to see all of these changes that you've already been implementing and living.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you so much, Katie. Really.
You're so welcome. Thank you. You know, like I said, I can talk about this stuff for hours. So it's been a pleasure.
It has.
Thank you.
And I mean, we're going to have these interviews, like, hopefully for a longer period of time. So it would be lovely to be back again.
Anytime. I would love that. Thank you, love.
And what are you thinking for the workshop?
All right.
Do you have something? 'Cause
Yeah, I would love.
you can talk and talk, but what's something that just give
Little
some
teaser.
people a bit of a flavor, a little teaser of what
What I would.
you're feeling right now?
Okay, so good question. I think that I would do something like just introducing the basics, because I think that the more newbies that come on board, the better. But I really think that I would love to teach in more depth how to read the transits of what we are experiencing in 2020. So most likely it would be something around this great reset that Roma has so succinctly put together. So teaching you guys how to understand this great reset by applying it to your own blueprint.
Nice.
Cool. I'm excited.
I'm looking
Very
forward to that.
excited. Thank you, Katie.
No,
All right.
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, love.
Thank you guys for listening and watching, and see you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.